Wow, I just read an astounding article called On the Same Wavelength. It was published in Aeon magazine, written by a philosopher of mind, and it was about the human need for what he describes as emotional synchrony. Emotional synchrony is another way of describing what I often have called the intersubjective, or what the Jewish mystic Martin Buber calls I-thou relationship. So emotional synchrony is the feeling that two people are having a common experience. We're both attending to the same thing. Our two subjectivities temporarily stitched together to be as one. Right? An experience of emotional synchrony sometimes happens when you watch a movie. They call this the deictic shift. When you get immersed or transfixed by the film, you assume the viewpoint of the character, and now you're seeing what he's seeing. You're seeing the same thing. Now you are emotionally attuned to the character, and so you're invested in the outcome of the film. This extends, of course, to interpersonal relationships. In fact, it plays out in interpersonal relationships with a resolution that can bond us to people and is ultimately what makes us uniquely human, unique in the animal kingdom. So this emotional attunement, this emotional synchrony that transpires when you feel connected with another person, again, is about having what Jamie Wheel calls communitas, a common experience. Two very different people who live in very different mind worlds temporarily assume the same viewpoint. They become attuned to each other. And the author in the article spent some time citing examples of how young babies, from when they're born up until the 18 months, they go through this developmental process of early face-to-face communication, what he calls proto-communication, that eventually evolves to the capacity of the infant to point to things in the environment. So then it becomes a face-to-face to object communication, whereby the child can look to you for an emotional attunement, to make sure we're having the same experience, sharing the same content, and then can point to something in the field, can point to an object in the world, and then check in with you to see what your emotional attunement and connection is to the object, to make sure you're on the same page, to make sure you're on the same wavelength. So it points out to the fact that for human beings, this emotional need for attunement, for synchrony, this empathy must lie, in fact, at the root of our astounding capacity for language, linguistics, rationality, everything that makes us miraculous. The mysteries of who we are born, he feels, from this capacity for empathy and for intersubjective and emotional attunement and emotional synchrony. Again, what Martin Buber calls I-thou. This feeling of the intersubjective, when two subjectivities assume the same viewpoint. It's like when we say to somebody, "Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? I did this and I did that and I loved it, and you know what I mean? And I kissed the girl, and you know what I mean?" We keep saying, "Do you know what I mean? Do you see what I mean? Are you with me? Are you on the same wavelength? Are we vibing? Are we on the same note? You feel me? You get me?" We want to be gotten. And this need to be gotten, to know that the person is on the same page, they're seeing what we're seeing, they're on the same wavelength. This is emotional synchrony, and it is at the root of what makes us human. So definitely look up the article in Aeon magazine. I'm sure you can just Google emotional synchrony, Aeon magazine. Amazing article. On the Same Wavelength, I think, is the title. But man, it really spoke to me, because particularly my love of experiences of ecstasy are accompanied by a desire and a compulsion to share those experiences. Like when I'm in the throngs of engrossment, when I'm transfixed by beauty, truth, and light, I always turn to my friend to make sure he's with me, to make sure we're having that experience. The compulsion to make sure we're connecting accompanies all ecstatic and elated experiences. When I'm transfixed by wonder, I want to make sure you're with me. And so this article just spoke to me, and I think it also is at the root of where my desire to make these videos come from, because what I'm doing is I'm making sure you feel me. I'm summoning coherence in the Bardos between one statement and another to make sure this is landing, to make sure you're on the same page, to make sure you're on the same wavelength with me. So it turns out this emotional synchrony, this need for emotional synchrony, it really landed for me. I read the article and I was like, wow, this guy's in my head. So anyway, it was really an amazingly enlightening afternoon to read that, and I wanted to share it with you. What a concept. Emotional synchrony. To be on the same wavelength. To know what we mean. To know that for me to know that you know what I mean. And that you know that I know what you mean. This is a magical thing. It explains so much. All right, that's it. Have a beautiful day.